I'd like to start just by stating up front that we have respect for all farmers, especially small-scale farmers, family farmers, anything that's not basically corporate agriculture.
We've heard stories about how a lot of farmers used these chemical fertilizers for like 50 years, and then yields started to decline, and no matter how much fertilizer they threw, they still weren't increasing their yields.
And that's the problem with the chemical fertilizers, is they're like NPK, it's like 3 things, and that's only a fraction of all the things that plants need to grow. So basically we've been mining all those different micronutrients, and at some point you got to pay your dues.
It's a fossil fuel based model for growing food. It's going in the wrong direction entirely. So people say that, well, it's going to feed the world. It's going to feed the world at enormous expense. Taro is such an interesting crop, and of all the crops to grow, I think it's the most complicated, the most interesting, and it's the one about which we probably know the least.
When we started farming, it's interesting because it was a very similar time period to now. This is, just post-Vietnam War, hippie days, but there was a very strong back to the land movement that was happening. And so it was not something unusual for us to be thinking, oh, we want to try farming.
And when we started farming, which is 41 years ago now, we everything we learned from other farmers. And back then, people were talking about organic farming. These were all conventional farmers.
The other thing that was our teacher was the land itself, and the kind of land that we were farming. The topography was pretty varied, and that varied topography means that you have to farm in certain ways. You can't do a monocrop kind of a thing. So from the very beginning, we were planting all kinds of different things. Cacao. Fermenting cacao.
Taro is about half of what we grow. Half of our income, I would say, is wetland taro, and we have a poi factory here on our farm, a certified kitchen, and we make poi. So our other main crops, I would say, are sweet potato, papaya, a lot of ulu, avocado, we have lychee, rambutan. I think we counted 70-some different things that we occasionally market. Right now we got Chinese peas and several different kinds of kale and broccoli and spinach. And we had a whole bunch of tatsoi and choy and Shanghai cabbage and things like that. So we get some really nice greens out of here because we don't get the cabbage looper eating making pukas in the leaves and things, and pretty much no mites or aphids and things. So it's something we're kind of experimenting with. I think it's a really good way to extend your growing seasons and grow things that ordinarily would be really hard to grow.
If something goes wrong with one thing, you got other things to take its place a little bit. That's where the diversity is important too. Add that diversity means that, there's all kinds of insects, there's all kinds of beneficial insects as well, and so you need that diversity for that ecosystem to function properly.
Well, when we started farming, like you said, we learned from a lot of other farmers, and so what the other farmers told us was how to throw fertilizer. We use chemical fertilizers, but we always tried to add organic matter too, and we didn't use poisons. So we knew enough to stay away from the poisons, but we didn't know how to stay away from chemical fertilizer. It was really easy to throw treble superphosphate, 10-20-20, triple 16, that kind of thing. Part of the reason we gave it up, I think, was that we found out about where we could get fish meal from island commodities, and that was considered organic fertilizer. It was really inexpensive, way cheaper than chemical fertilizer.
When you have that kind of organic fertilizer, the release time is really slow. So it lasts a long time at the ground, and it doesn't disappear, doesn't get leached out, doesn't volatilize, go into the air. Chop it in, water it in, and you're good.
When we started using this fish bone meal as fertilizer and paying attention to organic matter more, we had been doing some soil tests, and we knew that our soil levels were good, phosphorus levels were good, and everything was in good shape. So we didn't know if we were getting just as good crop yields because of residual fertility, or was it that our new methods were working. So maybe 10 years later we started to figure, okay, we're still getting good soil tests. Whatever it is we're doing, we seem to be doing the right thing. Whenever the river floods, the water turns all brown in the river, and it flows into the awai. As long as before the dam is broken, it's still flowing into the awai. And we like to capture this muddy water by flowing it especially into the empty lo'i. We don't want it to flow into the field where the taro is maturing, because that influx of nutrients, especially nitrogen, can actually hurt the taro, make it loli. But if we run it into the field where the taro is young, or an empty field like this, what ends up happening is that sediment settles into the taro patch. The taro patch mitigates the flood event, reduces the sediment load in the stream and going into the bay, and it captures a bunch of nutrients. The last thing you want is for your nutrients to flow out of your taro patch into the stream down to the ocean. Not just because you don't want to pollute the ocean or the stream, but because you don't want to lose your nutrients. So we always stop our water in and out. When we're weeding, when we're pulling taro, when we're fertilizing, we always stop our water in and out. We try and let it subside and not flow out while it's still muddy. This feels kind of overflowing though. Oh, here it is. There it is. Oh, this is open. This is what's plumbed up over here.
This field is one of two fields. We have one here and one up above that have not had any kind of fertilizer, at least not like, haven't even had fish bone meal for a long time, many years. And they only had organic matter or the invasive limu. We have put invasive limu in here too. So we're trying to see what production can be like if you use only organic matter, trying to replicate, how taro was grown way back when, pre-contact times.
Yeah, so this field is, we just finished pulling this. There's a few varieties left in the end that are special varieties. They want to leave them until we're ready to find a place to plant them. So once this field gets dried up,
we'll just start adding plenty of organic matter. Before this crop that was in here hauled I don't know, many trailer loads of tree trimmings, not chopped up kind, but just I drove down the road with the tractor and the trailer and cut all kind of branches and Schefflera trees and plum and all kind of things, and threw everything in there. It was like about 2 feet deep in branches and leaves. And then I ran over the whole thing with a tractor and a mower and chopped it all up, and then gradually tilled it all in, and that was the only fertilizer this field had. I think this been through at least 5 crop cycles where we've done this kind of a practice, and from what we can see, the taro is just as big, just as good quality as any of our other taro. And so we think this system works. It just takes a little bit longer time to add that much organic matter and have it break down.
Soil is incredibly complicated, and the more we find out about it, the more complicated it is. You know, the sheer number of organisms that can fit onto the head of a pin is just mind-boggling, and their interrelationship is all so complicated. But it's also true that you don't really need to understand the complexity of it, except to understand that it is complex. And so when it comes to this kind of farming, it's okay, feed that complexity. Don't treat it as if it's simple. Feed that complexity, but you don't need to know exactly how you're doing it. You just need to know that it's complex, and so give it a lot of organic matter and let it do its thing.
This is a lo'i that's going to be getting ready to plant pretty soon, probably in about 2 or 3 months, yeah, somewhere around there. It's going to take a while. So at this stage where it's been dried up, after the taro crop, previously it had a crop of corn, successive plantings of sweet corn, which is one way we use our fallow fields. We like to take the fallow field and take it from a wetland ecosystem with the taro in it to a dryland ecosystem, which totally changes the kinds of pathogens and things that are growing in it. So and the corn is also deep rooted, brings up nutrients that might have got leached down farther than the taro roots can get. And then we till all that corn tops and the corn biomass back into the surface of the ground. So at this stage what we're doing is adding tree trimmer mulch, bringing it in with our tractor and trailer and dumping piles of it, and we're going to spread that all out. And we're starting to add the invasive limu from Kaneohe Bay, which needs to stay in this watershed. So we spread that limu on this taro patch, and that is fairly high in potassium as well as all its trace element things. So what we're doing kind of right now is adding a lot of carbon, and we're adding a lot of trace elements and hopefully potassium in the form of the wood chips and in the form of the limu. And then later on, before we plant, we'll put the fish bone meal on it to give it the calcium, the magnesium, the phosphorus, and the nitrogen, and then we'll be ready to plant. We need to put all this stuff in early so it can really rot down well and more or less disappear before the taro goes in. The thing about the organic matter with wetland cultivation is if you have raw organic matter in your soil when you flood it, it's an anaerobic situation, and so it decomposes and produces a lot of hydrogen sulfide gas and things. So when you walk in the water, you see all these bubbles coming out of it, and the taro roots don't like that. So you really want it to be rotted down really well, down to humus kind of level, and so it pretty much is you can't see any organic matter in the soil when you plant the taro. So it takes a time to do that, but the carbon is still there.
And also the organic matter, if it's rotting in anaerobic conditions, if it's not rotted down already, then it's going to take nitrogen in order to break it down. So that's nitrogen that would go for the taro.
Yeah, the bacteria that break down raw organic matter need nitrogen, and that nitrogen doesn't become available until those bacteria die. So, and the same is true in dry land, the same kind of thing. And this is one of the things about organic farming, is that you put a lot of carbon back into the soil. It makes your soil able to hold nutrients a lot better, and it also sequesters carbon. It builds up your carbon in the soil, means that you get that much less carbon in the atmosphere. And that's one of the biggest benefits of organic farming, is taking carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it back into the soil. it's good to combat climate change.
So this is the tree trimmer stuff, and you can see actually it's a little bit warmer down here than it is on the top. So, you know, it's starting to break down even just in a pile like this. And once we get our tractor tiller fixed, we'll be able to till this into the ground, and then it'll break down a lot faster. And the limu that you guys filled yesterday, this is here too, so it'll all get tilled into the ground. And at the same time, all these weeds that are left here, they'll get tilled into the ground too. That's a way of adding organic matter too, is through those weeds. And then we also have sheep, which you can see right over there. You can see the ewe. She just gave birth to a lamb last night actually. And we use them to do a couple of things, like in a field like this. They've spent a lot of time in this field eating the weeds and pooping in the field at the same time. They also graze the banks of the patches. So even when the taro is planted, this is the second time we've experimented with them. The first time it worked pretty good. We did a lot less mowing. It doesn't look like a lawn like it does if you're mowing all the time, but they keep the grass down enough so that we didn't have to spend that time mowing.
So this field is much like the one that was up above, only it's a little bit farther along. The composted tree trimming mulch has been spread around more, and half of the field anyways has been disked, and the limu disked in. You can see that the limu here is drying up and breaking down and way smaller in volume.
So this field is ready to be tilled so that this stuff will break down even some more. And then a couple weeks before we're ready to plant it, we might, I don't know, put the fishmobile, till it in dry maybe, and then flood it. And that's assuming the field is pretty level. If we thought it was off level, we'd flood it, level it, and we could put the fishmobile in and incorporate it, disc it into the ground or stir it into the ground when it's wet. And then we're gonna wait a little bit, wait a week or so, or a couple weeks, and then it'll be ready to plant. And the fishmobile, we started off putting it at a higher rate than we put it now, because we found out that the nitrogen is a really slow release nitrogen. It lasts a really long time. And so you don't want to have too much nitrogen as the taro starts to get older, because then you get too much leaf and you won't get as much taro. So we now apply it at the rate of about 40 pounds per 1,000 square feet. And that application of that fishmobile and putting all this organic matter means that's the only time that we need to fertilize a crop of taro. So that first application of fishmobile is good enough.
Yeah, so this field right here is about 5,000 square feet. So at that rate of application, we'd be putting about 200 pounds of it. And that's all, pre-plant. Throw it on the ground, incorporate it, and that's pre-plant. That's the only time we fertilize. And whereas in contrast, when we used to use chemical fertilizers, we would be throwing it every 2 months at least, sometimes every month. We would, dry the field, stop the water, throw the fertilizer, let the field dry up, and then flood it again a week or two later. And we do that every month or every 2 months. And it was, a lot of work and a lot of expense. But this fish bone meal, it seems to last way better. And when the taro comes up for the first 10 months, and then it starts to shrink back down, if you have too much of that nitrogen, it won't shrink back down and your taro will come lowly. So I think we applied like 100 pounds per 1,000 square feet the first time we tried it. And it was at our other farm at Waihe'e, and the taro was, after 1 year time, was still like 6 feet tall, and never did shrink down. And we finally ended up pulling it, and it was all right, but not very good quality, not real dense. So we started cutting back, and then we cut back more, and we cut back more, till we got down to that 40 pounds per 1,000 square feet. That complementing of the limu with the fishbowl meal is really important, because you got to have that potassium that balances the fertilizer. So if you don't have that limu, you have to think of some other source of potassium. Limu in general is not something that you can't find. If it wasn't for the if the invasive limu was gone, some of the native limus would be way more abundant. And often after a winter storm, especially like along the North Shore, places like that, the winter storm surge throws a lot of our limu up on the beach and well above the high tide, the normal high tide mark. So if you go along the beaches after that kind of winter storm, you'll find a band of limu along high up on the beach. So sometimes it seems like there's really nothing new when it comes to this kind of farming.
Definitely not. I mean, the limu's been used around the world, all parts of the world. They've been using it as a fertilizer forever. So this is definitely not something new. The question is, could you know, if more and more people started growing, which is what we want people to do, you know, would you be able to gather enough, and how would you get it and get it to your fields? And so there's a lot of logistical problems that would have to be explored. Same with the organic matter. You know, if we didn't have, you know, the tree trimmers mulch, how would we get enough of that organic matter and get it onto the field and get it incorporated? So it's not simple solutions. And all of farming, all of this involves, in the long run, basically you got to have a lot more people involved in growing food. You can't be relying on just a handful of people to do all of that. It's got to be, we got to have a different kind of agricultural system that involves way more people, at least doing something.
The goal of farming is to improve your soil, to make your soil more fertile. It's not to, you know, mine it and be able to walk away from it 50 years later being richer, but your soil is poor. So you build up your soil, you make your soil productive, you grow as diverse a number of crops as you can. That's part of your way you deal with the bugs. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, and that's kind of what organic farming is all about.